Maria had spent the last 3 years trying to rebuild a life for her daughter, Lily, after losing her husband to a construction accident, and though the grief never fully left her, she kept moving forward, working long hours at the small diner in Ridgefield and doing everything she could to raise Lily with strength, kindness, and hope. But in a town where trouble liked to carry loud boots and loud voices, peace was always fragile, especially with the presence of a local troublemaking group. Known as the Ridge Boys, teenagers who had grown too confident in their ability to intimidate others, and since Maria's refusal to give them free food at the diner last month, the group had begun targeting her, teasing Lily, following Maria home, leaving trash on her porch, and laughing loudly whenever she tried to ignore them. But Maria, determined not to be bullied, stayed silent and strong, until one cold afternoon when she walked home with Lily from school, only to find the Ridge Boys blocking her path, smirking as if they owned the whole street, and while she held Lily's trembling hand tightly, Maria whispered for her to be brave, never realizing that this day, not yesterday, not tomorrow, would become the moment everything changed, the moment someone unexpected would step into their lives and turn fear into hope, darkness into strength, and danger into the spark of a story that would soon shake the entire town. The Ridge Boys approached Maria and Lily with the arrogance of boys who believed no one could stop them, circling the widow like wolves testing the bravery of their prey, throwing insults at her husband's memory and mocking Lily's fear until the little girl hid behind her mother's skirt, and despite Maria's attempts to de-escalate the situation, the boys pushed harder, grabbing her arms, shoving her back, and challenging her to fight back if she dared, their loud laughter echoing down the quiet street, and though Maria begged them to stop and leave Lily alone, the leader, a tall boy with a scar running down his jaw, stepped forward and shoved her so hard she hit the dirt, sending Lily screaming for help, yet no doors opened and no neighbors came out, for everyone in the area feared the Ridge Boys and their reckless tempers, and as Maria tried to pull Lily close to comfort her, the boys began kicking dirt at them, taunting them, inching closer with cruel grins, until the wind shifted and a sharp whistle cut through the air, freezing everyone in place, followed by a low, rumbling growl that made even the bullies' bravado flicker, and before any of them understood what was happening, a massive, disciplined canine, muscular, black-furred, and razor-focused, stepped slowly into the clearing, followed by a man whose calm, steady posture radiated an unshakable, dangerous confidence. A man who wore no uniform yet somehow looked more like a soldier than any policeman in town ever had. The man who approached was Jack Turner, a recently retired Navy SEAL who had moved to Ridgefield to escape the noise of the world and find some quiet with his service dog, Shadow, and though Jack had hoped to disappear into a peaceful routine, old habits, protective instincts, tactical awareness, and a deep rage toward bullies were still carved into him like steel, so when he saw the Ridge Boys cornering a widow and her daughter, something inside him snapped into focus, and without raising his voice, without showing an ounce of fear, he gave the boys a chance to walk away, but pride and ego made them spit back insults, calling him old man and mocking Shadow, unaware that the dog had more combat training than any man in the entire town, and as Jack stepped closer, his calm voice turned cold, his eyes locked onto the boys with the kind of warning that only men who have seen war could deliver, yet the Ridge Boys, too inexperienced to understand that they were facing something far beyond their level, dared to lunge forward, only for Shadow to drop into a defensive stance that made the entire group stumble back, and with one sharp command from Jack, the dog intercepted the leader's reckless attempt at violence, pinning him without harm, without teeth, just pure tactical precision, and as the other boys froze, realizing they were outmatched in every way, Jack helped Maria stand, brushing dirt from her shoulders, shielding Lily behind him, and speaking in a tone so steady that even the wind seemed to listen as he warned the Ridge Boys to leave, and never come near these two again. The Ridge Boys scattered like frightened animals, stumbling over themselves as Shadow barked once, only once, yet with enough force and discipline to send a chill down their spines, and as they ran, Jack didn't bother to chase them because he knew that true fear comes not from noise but from understanding exactly who you should never cross again, and when he turned back to Maria, she stared at him with trembling relief, her gratitude filling her eyes. As Lily clung to his leg like he was a superhero who had leapt out of a movie, but Jack simply knelt to reassure the little girl, telling her Shadow was a protector, a friend, someone who watched over people who needed safety, and after calming them both, he walked them home, scanning the street for any sign of the boys returning, though deep down he knew they had been humbled in a way they would not soon forget, and upon arriving at Maria's small house, he discovered how isolated she had been living, how long she had endured the boys' harassment in silence, how much pain she had carried alone, and though Jack had spent years avoiding emotional connection after the loss of several teammates, something about Maria's resilience and Lily's innocence began to pull him out of the shadows he had been hiding behind for so long. Jack returned the next morning not because he thought Maria needed protection but because Shadow refused to walk past her house without stopping, and soon their visits became a routine, Jack fixing her broken fence, Shadow playing with Lily, and Maria slowly opening up about her struggles, yet buried beneath these quiet moments was a larger truth. The Ridge Boys were nursing bruised pride and planning revenge, whispering lies about Jack, trying to gather others who shared their bitterness, but every rumor they spread only made people respect Jack more, especially after word spread that he had once rescued teammates under fire, defused hostile situations, and saved civilians overseas, and when Maria finally asked him why he risked himself for strangers, Jack simply said, "Because I know what it feels like to need help and have no one show up," a sentence that made Maria's eyes fill with tears as she realized he carried wounds far deeper than any she could see, and while the town slowly began to rally behind them, the Ridge Boys made one final attempt to reclaim their pride, cornering Maria again near the diner, but this time Jack and Shadow were Already waiting, already ready, and the look in Jack's eyes made the boys realize for the first time that bravery wasn't about being feared, it was about protecting someone who can't protect themselves. The final confrontation was brief, non-violent, and decisive, with Jack stepping between Maria and the boys, speaking with a firmness that left no room for argument, explaining that the sheriff now knew everything, the town now knew everything, and their behavior was no longer something they could hide behind childish excuses, and as their fragile courage crumbled, the rich boys apologized, not by choice, but by the weight of consequence, and though Maria forgave them, Jack made sure they understood that forgiveness didn't erase responsibility, and once the boys left for good, Maria turned to Jack with a gratitude so deep it left him speechless, and in the months that followed, the three of them, Jack, Maria, and little Lily, became an unlikely family, proof that courage can heal trauma. Kindness can break fear, and one act of bravery can change an entire town's heartbeat, and as their story spread online, inspiring thousands to stand against bullying, Maria finally looked into the camera one evening and said with a warm smile, "If this story touched your heart, if you believe in standing up for the innocent, then please subscribe to the channel, because together, we can make more stories that remind the world what real courage looks like." The months that followed brought peace Maria had not felt in years, a calmness that wrapped her small home like a warm blanket, with Jack often stopping by to help with chores, Shadow becoming Lily's closest friend, and the town slowly embracing the new sense of safety that surrounded them. But peace has a strange way of testing people, especially those who have earned it through pain, because just when life feels steady, the past often finds a way to knock again, and this time it arrived in the form of a dark SUV rolling slowly into Ridgefield, its tinted windows reflecting the gray afternoon, its engine rumbling with the kind of authority that didn't belong in a quiet town, and though Maria didn't notice it at first, Jack did the moment he stepped out of the diner with a bag of groceries he had picked up for her, his instincts flaring like a silent alarm, Shadow's ears perking up in sync as if the two were connected by invisible wires of experience and danger. The SUV parked near the old mechanic shop, and from it stepped a man Jack recognized instantly, a man from his past, from missions he rarely spoke about, Commander Hale, a high-ranking naval officer who had once overseen several covert operations Jack had been part of, and though Hale had always respected Jack for his discipline and unmatched field instincts, he never visited soldiers unless the matter was serious, urgent, or tied to something lurking beyond the surface. Jack felt his jaw tighten as Hale approached, the commander's presence pulling him back into a world he had promised himself he was done with, and before Hale even spoke a word, Jack could sense this visit was not friendly, casual, or coincidental. Maria, who had stepped out of the diner to wave at Jack, paused when she saw Hale's stern expression and the way Jack's posture shifted subtly, becoming stronger, sharper, like a soldier standing at attention. Lily peeked from behind the door, holding Shadow's collar, sensing tension without understanding its depth. "Turner," Commander Hale said quietly, his voice deep, steady, and carrying the weight of classified burdens. "We need to talk. Privately." The words cut through the calm of Ridgefield like a blade. Jack took a slow breath, nodding, then glanced at Maria, whose face showed concern, and assured her with a small motion of his hand. Shadow stayed close, pacing with controlled readiness as Jack followed Hale toward the SUV. The commander waited until the doors shut before he revealed a sealed file, sliding it across the console to Jack. "One of your old enemies resurfaced," Hale said, looking Jack directly in the eyes. "And he's looking for you." Jack felt a coldness settle in his chest, a darkness he had spent years burying. The name inside the file, though Hale hadn't yet spoken it, was one Jack had prayed would never return. A man dangerous enough to dismantle entire teams. A man who had nearly killed Jack and Shadow during their last mission together. A man Jack believed had died, but he wasn't dead, and now, he was coming here. To Ridgefield. To the town Jack had begun to care for. To the woman he had started to protect with more than duty. To the little girl who trusted him like a father. To the peace he had finally found of Maria, watching from a distance, didn't understand the details, but she felt the air change. She felt the weight of something approaching. Something bigger, darker, and far more dangerous than the Ridge boys ever were, and as Shadow pressed close to Jack, a low growl rumbling deep within his chest, Jack finally opened the file, his eyes sharpening as the reality hit him. The past wasn't done with him, not yet, and this time, the fight was coming straight to the people he cared about most. The moment Jack read the name inside the file, a tension settled into his muscles like cold iron, the kind of tension a soldier never forgets, and when he finally looked up from the papers, Commander Hale saw the shift in his eyes, no fear, just the controlled intensity of a man preparing for a war he hoped would never return. "He's alive," Hale confirmed, his voice low so no one outside the SUV could hear. "And we have intel he crossed state lines 2 days ago. He's off-grid, but his last tracker ping was only an hour from here." Jack closed the file slowly, every movement deliberate, as if he were locking away emotion and opening the door to instinct, and though he didn't speak immediately, Shadow's low growl spoke for him. Hale continued, "Turner, we need you back temporarily. Just until we contain this. He's looking for you. And he won't care who he hurts in the process." Those words struck deeper than Hale realized. Jack wasn't afraid for himself. He was afraid for Maria. For Lily. For the quiet life he had barely begun to build. The commander handed him a secured communicator, then placed a firm hand on Jack's shoulder, a gesture of respect and warning both. "Stay alert. Expect contact." He's unpredictable, and he's angry. With that, Hale stepped out of the SUV, leaving Jack with decisions that felt heavier than any mission briefing he had ever received. When Jack returned to the diner, Maria immediately sensed something was wrong, not because Jack looked scared, but because he looked like he was holding something back, something big. "What happened?" she whispered, stepping closer, her voice trembling with the fear of the unknown. Jack didn't want to place burdens on her shoulders, but he also refused to lie. "Someone from my past is back," he said quietly. "Someone dangerous." Maria swallowed hard, reaching instinctively for Lily, who stood behind the counter holding Shadow's leash. Shadow leaned against the little girl protectively, eyes scanning the windows as if he already knew danger was approaching. Maria tried to steady her voice. "Are we safe?" Jack stepped closer to her, lowering his voice. "You are. I promise you that." But the truth was harsher. Safety was no longer guaranteed that night. Jack did not return to his cabin. Instead, he stayed outside Maria's home, sitting silently on the porch with Shadow beside him, scanning the tree line, the street, the rooftops, every detail, every shadow, because he knew the man hunting him was smart, trained, and cruel enough to watch before striking. Hours passed in silence, the cold wind whispering through the grass, the moon hidden behind clouds like it too feared what lingered in the darkness. Around midnight, Shadow's ears perked. His body stiffened. His growl turned razor-thin. Jack immediately rose to his feet. He felt it too, that prickling sensation at the back of the neck, the one soldiers learned to trust more than their own sight. Someone was watching them. Not close, but near enough to send a message. Then, just as Jack stepped down from the porch, something slid across the ground toward him, a small metal object stopping right at his boots. A bullet casing. Polished. Placed. A signature. A warning. Jack picked it up, his fingers curling around it with silent fury. Shadow growled louder now, pacing, scanning the shadows for movement. And then Jack saw it, in the distance, on the ridgeline, a faint reflection of light off what could only be binoculars. And right below it, a silhouette. A man standing perfectly still, watching him. Watching Maria's home. Watching everything Jack cared about. And though the figure vanished seconds later, it was enough. The storm wasn't coming, it was already here, and Jack knew this enemy wasn't testing him, he was hunting him, and he would not stop until he got what he wanted. Jack didn't sleep for a single second that night. He sat on Maria's porch with Shadow pressed against his leg, both of them tracking every whisper of the wind, every shifting shadow, every unnatural silence that hinted at danger lurking nearby. By dawn, Jack's mind was already in full tactical mode, mapping escape routes, identifying possible ambush angles, calculating how to protect Maria and Lily if the enemy made a move. Maria opened the door quietly, her eyes tired from a night of worry, and when she saw Jack still awake, still alert, still guarding her home like a fortress, her heart tightened. "You didn't rest at all," she whispered. Jack shook his head. "He's close." And the weight of those words made Maria instinctively pick up Lily and hold her tighter. Shadow stepped inside briefly to nudge Lily's hand in reassurance before returning to Jack's side like a sentinel carved from muscle and loyalty. Jack told Maria to stay indoors, lock everything, and avoid all windows. She obeyed without question, not out of fear, but out of trust. By mid-morning, Jack received a coded ping on the communicator Hale had given him. 3 beeps. A covert signal used only when something urgent was found. Jack stepped away from the house to answer it. Hale's voice cut through with static but carried unmistakable urgency. "Turner, we intercepted a message. He's in town. Not hiding anymore. He wants you to know he's here." Jack gripped the communicator tightly. "Did he say what he wants?" Hale exhaled sharply. "He wants revenge. For what happened during Operation Iron Gate." Jack's jaw clenched. Operation Iron Gate, the mission where his team lost 2 men. The mission where Jack and Shadow barely survived. The mission where the enemy commander, Varek, was presumed dead after an explosion. But he hadn't died. He had escaped. And he had been waiting years for this moment. Jack ended the call and turned toward Maria's house, only to freeze. Shadow growled low, ears pinned forward, body rigid. On the porch sat an envelope. A black envelope. Jack approached it slowly, sensing a trap, but it was only a letter, no explosives, no mechanisms. Inside was a single photograph. A picture taken only hours ago. A picture of Maria and Lily inside the diner. Varek had been watching them. Watching closely. Watching enough to know their routines. Jack's grip tightened until the photo nearly tore. The message was clear: "I can reach them anytime I want." Jack marched to the backyard, pacing as adrenaline surged through him. Shadow followed him step for step, mirroring his tension. Jack knew Varek's tactics. He didn't strike immediately. He stalked. He studied. He broke his target mentally before attacking physically. And that meant this was only the beginning. Hours later, while Maria prepared lunch for Lily inside, Jack suddenly felt the air change. Shadow sensed it first, ears snapping up, body turning sharply toward the tree line. Jack raised his hand, signaling the dog to stay low. They both stared toward the woods. Then, a figure emerged, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing tactical boots and a dark jacket. His movements slow, deliberate, fearless, like a man who knew he was being watched and didn't care. Varric stepped out fully into the open, his cold eyes locking onto Jack with a calmness that was more terrifying than rage. A lion studying another lion. A predator acknowledging a predator. Jack moved forward until the two men stood 20 yards apart, the distance where words mattered and movements were judged. Long time, Turner, Varric called out, voice low but carrying through the still air. Jack didn't respond. Not yet, you took something from me, Varric continued, stepping slowly to the side, circling like he was already imagining the fight. So now I'm here to take something from you. Shadow growled, lowering into attack stance, awaiting Jack's command. Jack finally spoke, his voice steady, unshakable. If you come near them, it's over. Varric smirked a cruel, practiced smile. Oh, Jack, it's already begun. He lifted a small device. A remote trigger. Jack tensed, ready for an explosion, ready for anything. But instead, the trigger activated a distant sound, a siren? A phone? No. A timer. A countdown, somewhere near. Somewhere close. Jack's blood ran cold. Varric stepped back into the shadows. Tick-tock, Turner. Let's see how good you really are. Jack sprinted toward Maria's house. Shadow leapt beside him. The hunt had officially begun. And Jack knew this time, this wasn't a battle fought in war zones. This was in his town. His street. His home. And the enemy wasn't after him, he was after the people Jack loved.